I think NASA is sensible in doing things like looking for planets around nearby stars. Not that it changes the probability that there's life out there. It's either there or it isn't there. What we know about planets and stars doesn't tell us anything at all in terms of whether it's likely that there's life out there. Some people say it makes it seem more likely. Well, maybe to us, but it doesn't change the odds at all. I think looking at places where there might be water, Europa and so forth, this is a rational thing to do. Looking at Mars from a different viewpoint, water cutting the channels, there's some other strange things going on Mars. I think that's all rational. I am disappointed at the lack of leadership in NASA. Kennedy set a goal, get to the moon by the end of the decade. Not next year. It was very important that there was 8 years or so in between there, because then you could achieve subsidiary goals. You wouldn't have to justify your budget on an annual basis. You can build big rockets, you can do better communication systems, figure out techniques for rendezvous and so forth. And you have room for creativity. The original plan to go to the moon involved 2 launches from Earth. They would get together in orbit and then go to the moon. We do it with one because we have lunar Earth orbiting. One guy pushed that and showed that it would affect. You don't want 2 launches. If something goes wrong with the pad, you got somebody stranded out there. Not a good idea. I think that what's missing is setting a goal. We don't have a goal, except to keep NASA's budget going. And many of the astronauts were disappointed when the 25th and 30th anniversary of landing on the moon, to realize that we hadn't set up a lunar base, we hadn't set a plan to go to Mars. We're thinking about the possibility of perhaps considering the feasibility of investigating a trip to Mars. What kind of leadership is that? No guts. Worst meeting I ever attended in industry. I was at Aerojet, worked for Westinghouse, working on a nuclear rocket program, had a meeting at Aerojet, Sacramento. They were the prime contractor. And somebody asked me if I want to go to this meeting that the NASA Space Nuclear Propulsion Office was having. Sure. The focus of the meeting is, what should we do with the nuclear rocket? They didn't know what they wanted to do with the darn thing. And somebody said, well, we could use it for Earth orbit, to lunar orbit rendezvous. We could set up a base on the moon. Maybe we could use it as an upper stage to go to Mars. No, the public won't pay for it. Here they're spending all this money on this program. We're moving right along. We're having good test results. And they don't know what they want to do with it. What kind of leadership is that? The comparison I've used is they needed an Admiral Ricko. He was the guy who pushed the U.S. nuclear Navy program, despite the battleship admirals and all the other guys. And it was only after we developed the nuclear submarine that the Polaris missile came along. They didn't develop it for that. But it was a natural. It made sense. If you can get a ship that can move underwater at high speed, doesn't need to come up to get air, which is basically what a nuclear submarine doesn't have to do, then there's obvious advantages. How are they going to find you down there? And then, hey, if you got that system, gee, maybe we could launch a rocket from it. Hey, that's a pretty good idea. Why don't we try that? What I'm saying is, I worked on 5 different programs, I think, where we desperately needed leadership and didn't have any. At GE on the nuclear airplane program, the only investment they had was the rug on the boss's floor. It was government facilities, cost plus contract. They weren't providing leadership. They were spending the money. And on several other programs, we need somebody who says, this is where we want to go. And if you don't like the way we're going there, get off the train. This is what we're going to do. And there's been a total lack of that with NASA. So I appreciate the fact that they're not supporting the SETI cultists. I think that's reasonable. But they haven't taken the next step to say, where does this fit? Do we want to go to Mars? Why don't we set up a colony on the moon? They haven't provided leadership. There are some private groups that are making a case for going to Mars, and I think they tend to be right. And I get so sick of these people saying, why do you want to go to Mars? We got troubles down here. Well, the money gets spent here. There's no Martian gas station. You're paying for the gas, to use to get back. And also, NASA is not terribly creative or profit-oriented. I'd let industry figure out ways to make money from this stuff and to cut costs and weight. Do we realize that the shuttle is using 20-year-old technology? I mean, just look at computers on your desktop now versus 20 years ago, and you say, hey, wait a minute, they're really stuck with that old stuff. Let's do it better. And the faster, cheaper, etc. is a good approach to take, but you still need supervision.